يتدبرون القرآن
ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Surah An-Nisa, this fourth surah according to the order of the surahs in the Quran, a beautiful surah as all the surahs of the Quran, with many of the rules and regulations and ahkam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And it's important for us to look into the Quran the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it, the way it was compiled at the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, because this order is not something that happened after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's the one through the wahy, the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, made the order of these surahs as we know it in the Quran, although it's not according to how it was revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by the wahy, by the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, made the Quran in such an order. And it's meant to be this way, for someone to recite the Quran and to move from one surah to the other for the upbringing of ourselves, our iman, so that we are steadfast on the deen of Islam, the purpose of our life, and that is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This surah is a Madani surah, which means it was revealed in Al-Madinah to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And the ulama in the subject of ulum al-Quran, or the sciences of the Quran, they talk about the differences between the surahs that were revealed in Al-Madinah versus the ones that were revealed in Mecca before the hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you can see the major differences between the two types of surahs of the Quran. One quick example is when you look towards the end of the Quran, the ones that has the short verses, like Juz' Amma and these types of surahs, this was revealed in Mecca. So it has its uniqueness in which most of it, the verses are short, it's precise in the meaning of matters of the belief, pillars of al-Iman, talks about the hereafter. Usually the call, if there's a call in it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call upon mankind. You would find many of Ya Ayyuhan Nas, which is different than the surahs that were revealed in Al-Madinah, in which you would find the call is Ya Ayyuhal Ladhina Amanu, O you who believe. Why? Because there are many rulings that is only for the believers, those who submitted themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we would find that the first verse in Surah An-Nisa, although it was revealed in Al-Madinah, but the call is Ya Ayyuhan Nas, O mankind, to confirm the fact that the Quran is to all mankind at all times. And still after the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Al-Madinah, the call was to all the people, to the Muslims, to the non-Muslims, for the non-Muslims to embrace the truth and enter into the fold of Islam. Also, when we look into the surah, and we find many of the rulings mentioned in it, which is quite different than it was before in Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran. Surah An-Nisa has many rulings in it, especially with regards to relationships, matters of inheritance. Before that, it matters of the orphan and silat al-arham, to be kind to the kin and kith, as we will discuss inshallah ta'ala in this episode. So many rulings are in this surah regarding the relationships that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created as human beings, not isolated, but living in such a complex relationships. And this order is such a beautiful, a magnificent way to have the surah after Surah Al-Fatiha, Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran. Surah Al-Fatiha is such a general surah that all the meanings of the Quran, you would find it in the verses of Surah Al-Fatiha. And that's why we recite it in every rak'ah in the salah. And then Surah Al-Baqarah with its general statements and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human beings and the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for people to worship Him alone, and the nations before and what happened to Bani Israel, and many things, matters of Tawheed, matters of belief. And the same thing with Surah Ali Imran about the Tawheed, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and refuting the calls of the people of the book, and raising the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have the knowledge, to have the courage, to have the sabr, the patience, to hold fast to the deen, facing their enemies and getting to know the plots of their enemies and so on. So all of this is like foundation for then the rulings to come. People would submit themselves to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we look into any society, and this is one of the goals of the Sharia, of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people live in societies and relationships. So these types of relationships should be governed by the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they have the patience and the courage and the proper belief, then it's a matter of submission, and it's easy for them then to step over their own desires and to fulfill the orders of Allah in relationships, whether it's between a husband and a wife, or children, or orphans, mainly the weak among the society, as this is the beginning part of the surah. So it's something that we have to witness this. We have to see that in the surah and to learn these ahkam. So we would find the tafsir of the surah slightly different than before, because we will talk about matters of fiqh, maybe matters of rulings, halal and haram relationships and so on, which is different than the general statements that were mentioned before. One last thing before we start the surah. As the way always when we ponder over the verses of the Quran, the goal is to implement this in our life, to practice the Quran. And this is the goal, otherwise the Quran becomes against us in the Day of Judgment. So to implement the verses of the Quran, we assume that we already learned what's in Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran, and before that Surah Al-Fatiha. So we have the foundation that we need for us to be able to apply what's in Surah An-Nisa. And that foundation is the Tawheed, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the strength in which we are willing to submit ourselves to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just wanted to know now the rulings, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, so that we would submit ourselves to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we have that foundation that we learned in the previous surahs of the Quran. The surah, as all the surahs of the Quran, starts, as you would see in the Mus'haf always, with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. When we start reciting the Quran at any time, we say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. We seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the cursed shaitan. This is at all times, whether you start from the beginning of the surah or in the middle of the surah, we start always with this. Even in salah, but we say it silently. We don't say it loud, we say it silently, that we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the cursed shaitan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us in the Quran to do so. But we won't find this written in the Quran that we would see, because the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, when they wrote the Quran, they did not put this down. And that's why anything that you see written, this was instructed to them by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So you would always find Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, except in Surah At-Tawbah, there is no Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim there. And we talked about that before, that Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, according to the most correct opinion among the scholars, is not a verse, is not an ayah in every surah. And that's why you won't find number 1 next to it. This is not a verse in Surah An-Nisa, but it's a separate verse, separate ayah from the Quran that marks the beginning of a surah. That marks the beginning of a surah, and that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they wrote it down, and they would get to know the beginning of a surah by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So this is in the beginning of every surah we say that, and we get to know the meaning of this at all times, Bismillah, in the name of Allah. And as if we're saying in the name of Allah, we will recite the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything is by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we need to be reminded of that all the time. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, we talked about that before, that both they share the same meaning, And if Ar-Rahman is mentioned alone, it means in it Ar-Rahim. And if Ar-Rahim is mentioned alone, it means in it also Ar-Rahman, which comes from the meaning of the most merciful. Comes from the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful. So it means mercy. Whether Ar-Rahman means the mercy itself and the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Ar-Rahim when the mercy is implemented, or when the people or the human beings or the creation of Allah, they are the subject of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then comes this attribute of or the name Ar-Rahim. Also the other meaning is that Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His mercy is for everything and everyone in this world that we live in, for the believers, for the disbelievers, and for the animals and everything. But Ar-Rahim, which also means the most merciful, it's a special mercy. Special mercy for the believers in the hereafter. For the believers in the hereafter, they would receive the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the disbelievers will be deprived of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter. Why? Because they will be dealt with the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So after we say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, then Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, then the first verse, ayah in Surah An-Nisa, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. Which means, O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you from one soul and created from it its mate, and dispersed from both of them many men and women. And fear Allah, through whom you ask one another, and the wombs. Indeed, Allah is ever over you an observer. So the first ayah in the surah, a call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, O mankind. That includes everyone, believers, disbelievers, everyone, O mankind. And this is what, when we're reciting these verses, we are included in this. This is a call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to each and every one of us. And the call then, after it comes with a certain order that we need to check with ourselves whether we're applying this or not. We have to first learn it, and what does it mean, what's the implications of it, and then we will have the patience and the courage to apply it and to be steadfast in applying it in our life. اتقوا ربكم. The order here is to اتقوا ربكم, and we had this many times before. اتقوا, this is an order, this is a verb that gives the order, which means shield yourself, protect yourself, have something to protect yourself. اتقوا ربكم, shield yourself from your Lord. Of course, this is not what it means, but it means fear your Lord. Shield yourself from the punishment of your Rabb, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner, is the creator, and this is the meaning of al-rububiyyah, rabbakum. It did not say ittaqullah like many verses of the Quran. It says ittaqu rabbakum. So this is a reminder to all mankind. Why? Because all mankind, most of them, they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the Lord of the alameen, that He is the creator, the sustainer, the provider. So then, as a result of that, it's a reminder for them that makes it more likely for them to understand and to comprehend, so that there's no excuse whatsoever. Fear Him alone. Shield yourself from His punishment, because He is the most wise. He did not create the heavens and the earth. He did not create the human being for play. He created them for a great purpose, and that is to worship Him alone. And in the Day of Judgment, there is the hellfire and there is the Jannah. The hellfire for the disbelievers and the sinners and so on, and the Jannah, the paradise for the believers. So fear your Lord. It's a beautiful fear, because fear is not something that is pleasant. Human beings, they don't find fear to be a pleasant feeling. But when it comes to the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear of the creator of the heavens and the earth, it's the joy of this life. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. And when people fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would be steadfast on His religion, they would be obedient to Him, and having the good expectations of Him that He would reward them and so on. And He is the one that ought to be feared and ought to be obeyed, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anyway, human beings are created with fear. either they fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Most High, or they would fear His creation. And if they fear the creation of Allah, this is the misery of this life. This is what is negative about fear. This is what people are terrified when they talk about fear, because it's the fear of other than Allah, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's such a beautiful thing. This is an act of worship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calling all mankind to fear the Lord, to obey Him, to submit themselves to Him, and then to convince them. And this is the mercy of Allah. Why they need to obey Allah? Why they need to fear Him? See, the mercy of Allah, that He does not need for the human beings to be convinced, because He's the one that created them, but out of His mercy He make it easy for them. الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. The one that created you, He is the one that created you from نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, from one soul. This is a specific soul, not something else. What's the specific soul? Is Adam alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, all of us, the mankind that is mentioned in the call, we're all created from one soul. And that gives the sense of unity among the human beings. They're all the same. So they're all created from one soul. So there's no differences between one or the other, superiority for one over the other, based on anything except for the purpose of their existence, and that is for them to submit to the call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that created you from one soul, nafsin wahida. We continue inshallah ta'ala with this first ayah, first verse of Surah An-Nisa after the break. So stay with us inshallah.
يتدبرون القرآن.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Continuing with the first ayah of Surah An-Nisa, and the call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all mankind to be dutiful to the Lord, the one that created them from one soul, and that is Adam alayhi salam. And the significance of these words that are mentioned, the Lord, one soul, and the purpose of that is that all mankind then should not have an excuse. The matter is so easy to be proven to them, that if they believe in the Lord of the heavens and the earth, then they should be dutiful to Him alone. They should fear Him alone, and to remember that they have been created from one soul. So there is no need for them to be arrogant or to feel superiority over another based on race or color of the skin or whatever there is, especially when the surah is going to deal with rulings that has to do with relationship with human beings towards one another. So a foundation to this, that people would get to know that they are created from one soul, from Adam. So no matter how much different they are from one another, they need always to remember that they're all from Adam, and Adam from Turab or from dust, to humble themselves. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا. And that one soul, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created from it its mate, زوجها, Eve, the wife of Adam alayhi salam. And this is something that is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth from one generation to the other. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, both men and women, and how that the men are in need of the women and women are in need of men, and they cannot sustain their life without both. And this is how life keeps on going with this way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. This is not something that the human being decided for themselves. This is by the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why then the human being should be arrogant? They should humble themselves, and they should witness the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the significance of this, that since He created Adam alayhi salam, and from Adam He created its mate Eve, and then from one generation to the other there are men and women, as the verse says, it means it's meant for it to be that way, for people to fulfill the purpose of their existence, and that the purpose of their existence would also entitle that there is something to do with this fact, that there are men and women, that there are marriage. There is certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave them like this, but for them to be together, for them to enjoy the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them with, they have to abide by the orders of Allah. And if they don't, they subject themselves to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it says after that, وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. وَبَثَّ means dispersed. And this is what literally it means. because it's only from two, from Adam and Eve, many men. وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا, رِجَالًا men, كَثِيرًا many, وَنِسَاءً and women. Many men and women that are dispersed throughout the earth, although they started just from Adam and Eve, from one soul, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. So you can say, and He created from them both men and women, but the word batha gives the feeling of the dispersion of the human beings, although they are from one soul, right? And that's why it's meant for it to be this way again, for people to remember to apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pertaining to this fact. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after that repeating the order for people to fear Him, for people to be dutiful to Him, saying وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ, which means وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, again, fear Allah, be dutiful to Allah. But here the word is used Allah in the beginning of the verse, اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ, اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ and اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Both they mean the same thing. And this is something that we mentioned before many times, and we have to pay attention to that. Now we should be used to it in the Quran. That if اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ is mentioned alone, that's the only thing mentioned in the context. It means اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ, اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, fear your Lord, the one that created you, be dutiful to Him. اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ means the same thing. But the significance of using them both in the same context, the first one is to all mankind, and that's why they were reminded by the word رَبَّكُمْ, your Lord, the one that created you, the one that sustains you, that they believe in this. The second one, as if it's specifically to the believers, those who submitted themselves and they applied the first part of the verse, that they submitted themselves to the Lord and they worship Him alone. Then the order وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. Taqullah, Allah comes from the meaning of the one to be worshipped. So after the covenant has been taken from them, from La ilaha illallah, that He's the only one worthy of worship, then shield yourself from the punishment of Allah. Be dutiful to the one that you stated the fact that He is the only one worthy of worship, and that's when it comes the specific rulings. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ, الَّذِي, the one whom you تَسَاءَلُونَ, that you're asking one another by. People ask by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether they are in need of something, they would say, by Allah, give me this. Or whether they are being threatened by someone of power, and say, for example, they're about to take their lives, and you would find the person saying, by Allah, let me free, or do not kill me, or whatever there is. And this is something even at times of jahiliyyah, times of ignorance, disbelievers, they would still say that. And why? Because they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They believe in the Lord of the heavens and the earth, but they would associate partners with Him. So they would ask by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one another. Wal arham, which means that they used to also ask by the arham. Arham is the plural of rahim, womb, which means they would ask one another by the relationship, the kin and kith, the relationship of the womb, brothers, sisters, uncles, and so on. So they would ask one another by their tribe, by their clan, by their relationship, reminding them that I deserve for you to be kind to me because I'm your relative, or that you don't harm me because I'm your relative from the same race. This is how they used to be in the times of ignorance. Also, the other meaning is وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ, fear Allah, be dutiful to Allah, the one that you ask one another by, and fear Allah with regards to al-arham, with regards to the wombs, to the relationship, towards your relatives. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards them. Be dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by applying His orders, that He ordered you to be kind to them, and not to sever the relationship, because severing the relationship between you and your kin and kith and your relatives is a major sin. That means what? That means the purpose of your life, which is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not just specific rituals or specific actions that is only between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's more comprehensive than that. After you have the foundation of the Tawheed, then you get to know that there's other covenants here, that you are kind to those who you are living with, because we're not created and living in isolated islands. We're created in complex societies and so on. So to be kind to the ones that are closer to you, they have more rights on you. To be kind to them, to take care of them, not to sever the relationship. So this is part of the deen, part of the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for people to neglect that, they're not then fulfilling the purpose of their life. Even if they are the best in prayers, the best in dhikr, remembrance of Allah, the best in fasting and so on, but if they're severing the relationship between themselves and their relatives and kin and kith, they are evil people. They are evil people. They subject themselves to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not righteous whatsoever. So the matter then, it's a serious one. That's why the rulings in the surah, it's something that for us that we have to learn. Some people take the religion of Al-Islam as some personal acts of worship. And actually most of the people on the face of earth, they take religion like this. And unfortunately many of the Muslims today, and this is the dilemma and this is the misery that we're living nowadays, that many of us as Muslims, the religion is just some personal relationship between yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your salah, your dua, your dhikr, and your life has nothing to do with the deen of Islam. This is not the case. Your relationships is part of the deen of Islam. Your marriage, if there is a divorce, if there is any means of goodness, your neighbors, your relatives, your children, offsprings, your grandchildren, your father, your mother, your grandparents, your cousins, your aunts from the mother side, from the father side, your uncles from both sides, and it goes on and on. And the more they are closer, the more they have more rights on you. And the further away, they have rights on you. And this is something that has to be observed. And we have to make sure that we understand the religion of Islam this way, because this is part of the deen. Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba, that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of what you're doing. He's observing everything that we do. We're not just left like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-seer. Although there is no reckoning now, that's why the disbelievers, they thought that since things is happening, they thought that just the world is doing things on its own. Even though they believe that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that created them, but He left this world for it to function on its own. This is false, of course. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator and He is the sustainer. And He is subhanahu wa ta'ala observing, watching, and He's the all-seer. Everything we do, any relationship that we are in, we are being tested with regards to this relationship. Are we applying the orders of Allah, or are we disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Doesn't mean that you would always make the other side happy with you. No, the goal is to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to the rulings that He ordered us, with regards to these relationships. And this is again the subject, or the main subject of the surah, and that's what we really need to take serious. Many people, they get married and they think if they have the knowledge that this is part of the deen. Of course, many people, they take it, it's not deen. They take it as a deen if they are performing the marriage contract, right? And then once they finish the marriage contract, then they live their life between the husband and the wife according to their own desires, according to their culture, according to the time they live in. They don't observe that this is part of the deen. And if they do observe that this is part of the deen, they don't learn how to deal with one another. They think just to be kind and that's it. This is not it. There's certain rulings. There's responsibilities. Whether the other side, they like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's a deen, it's a religion, it's orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's knowledge for us to learn. If a person is about to get married, people, those who are married, they have children, they have relatives, rulings of inheritance. All of this is something that people have to observe. So when we look into this, the subject of al-arham, or to be kind to the kin and kith, is a subject that is neglected by many of us. So when we look into the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, we would find many verses. And before waiting till the next time the verse comes with the subject, let's just mention some of the specifics with regards to being kind to the kin and kith and Silat al-Arham. This verse is an evidence of that. There are many verses in the Quran that talks about this. But one, just mention some of the virtues of it. It's one of the means to have increase in one's life. The time that we live on the face of earth is all determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made certain means for people, for them to live longer or less, although everything is set. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made it part of the means, which is, for example, if a person wants to live longer, And this is a good thing as long as the person is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the ways to do that is to be kind to your kin and kith, which is mentioned in this verse. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, in which he said عليه الصلاة والسلام من أحب أن يبسط له في رزقه وينسأ له في أثره فليصل رحمه. And this is in Bukhari and Muslim. Whoever love for his rizq, for his provisions to be more and abundance, and whoever love for his life to be longer, then he should فليصل رحمه. He should connect the relationship with his kin and kith. This is something that is from the unseen that we get to know. Although everything is set, but this is one of the means. That as the ulama they say, it will be said to the angels, the angel of death for example, if that person is kind to the kin and kith, then he live longer, he lived to that age. If not, then it's less. And it's all by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who chose the virtues of this. Yasir rahimah, or to yasir means connect, right? The relationship, which means what? It means to be kind to them, to be there for them if they are in need of you, not to do the opposite, and that is severing the relationship, to boycott them or to stay away from them because they have rights on you. To the extent of which, if somebody, and for us to see this, which is something that is absent in the materialistic life that we live nowadays, according to the rules of the Deen of Islam, if someone kills someone by accident, a car accident for example, he didn't mean to, but it happened, right? There has to be a diya or blood money to be given to the family of the deceased. Who is to give this blood money? People would say the one that did the accident. No, not just him. It's al-aqila. It's himself and the relatives. A person would say, but the relatives, they have nothing to do with this. This is part of the relationship, that people have the feel of unity. They support one another. In the religion of Islam, we're not greedy towards one another. We're supposed to be kind to one another. That this is something that makes us unique as Muslims. That your relatives, they have more rights on you. You would find people nowadays living their life, their relatives is like anyone else, is like a stranger to them. Even the strangers, they have rights on us. But relatives, the father, the mother, the children, the relatives, the aunts and uncles and so on, they have rights on us. So to that extent, the Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering us to be kind to those who are close to us. And imagine that this is happening to all Muslims, then the whole society will be in such a great shape. Why? Because everybody is kind to those who are close to him. That means everybody will be kind to everyone else. So this is just an example, and we continue that inshallah ta'ala in the last segment, discussing this first ayah, verse in Surah An-Nisa. So stay with us inshallah ta'ala.
يتدبرون القرآن.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Still with the first ayah, verse of Surah An-Nisa, with the subject of to fear Allah with regards to al-arham, to the kin and kith and the relatives and so on, and how this is such a virtue, such an important thing in our religion that makes us unique in the way that we understand the purpose of our life and understanding the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many people, especially those who may be living in the West or those who are affected by the so much dry and materialistic way of life, they don't know their relatives. And that's why there's an authentic hadith. Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he mentioned it in the book of Al-Adab al-Mufrad, and it's a sound hadith. He said alayhi salatu wasalam, ta'allamu ansabakum. Learn your lineage. Get to know your lineage. Right? For what reason? ثُمَّ صِلُوا أَرْحَمَكُمْ. Then connect and be kind to your relatives, to your kin and kith. So get to know your lineage, get to know your relatives. Right? And the hadith says that maybe there might be something between a man and his brother in Islam, something of bad feelings and so on, and he get to know that they have some form of a relationship, even if it's a further away one, and maybe that will be more likely or make it easy for him to be kind to him, although we're supposed to be kind to everyone. So this is one of the things to be done and to be learned from this. Get to know your relatives and to make sure that you're kind to them, but we have to be careful that protecting our religion is the priority. So if your relatives are causing harm to you, harm to your religion, then you have to make sure that you take the measures to protect your religion. Some people, they go into the other extreme, thinking for them to be kind to the relatives, okay, so they go visit them, and while they're visiting them, they commit sins, and if they enjoin good and forbid evil, if they leave and so on, the relatives will be upset with them. They might even boycott them and so on. So they would say, let me just not make them upset. This is not permissible. To protect the deen of Allah is the priority in our life. So in a kind way, in a gentle way, you do not associate with them while they are committing sins. But people not necessarily committing sins at all times. So being kind to them, visiting them, as long as there's no haram involved. If there's haram, forbidden things involved, then you don't do that one particular act. You ask about them, you give them gifts. If they are in need of help, you help them, and so on. Whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, right? With the different rights, of course, and to be kind to them without, again, compromising anything of our religion. So many people, they don't get to know their relationships, right? And we have to observe. Some people think, for example, cousins in Islam, they are strangers to you in the sense, if it's men and women, you have to observe lowering the gaze and hijab and so on. So if they don't, you need to observe that as much as you can, and to still have the relationship being connected. If they're in need of something, there's nothing wrong with sending them gifts and so on and so forth. It depends on the culture and where people are and so on, but this is a duty. This is part of the religion. Also, this is one of the first things that people would get to know about the deen of Islam. You know, when someone embraces the religion of Islam and they are taught to believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah and the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then after that, the very first things like with salah and so on is to be kind to your relatives. And this is something that in the long hadith of Heraclius, when Abu Sufyan, before he was a Muslim, he talked to the leader of the Romans and everything. He asked him what is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is asking his people to do. He said that he's asking them, اعبدوا الله ولا تشركوا به شيئا, worship your Lord, do not associate partners with him, and leave what your forefathers used to tell you, meaning worshipping idols and so on. ويأمرنا, this is said, he ordered us to بالصلاة والصدق والعفاف والصلة, that he ordered us to make salah, to be truthful, to be chaste, and to protect our honor and dignity, and wasila, and to be kind to the relatives. This is part of what the Prophet ﷺ called the people when he was still in Mecca. In the foundation, this is part of the foundation of the religion of Islam, not just something, a branch of a ruling. This is part of the foundation of the deen, and we'd find it very clear in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Even Aisha radiallahu anha, Khadija radiallahu anha, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam came to her after the first time he encountered the wahy, the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he came to her and he was shivering and scared, he didn't know what was this. Khadija radiallahu anha, she took the evidence that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not disgrace him whatsoever. For what reason? She said to him, كَلَّا وَاللَّهِ مَا يُخْزِيكَ اللَّهُ أَبَدًا. No, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah would never disgrace you, would never humiliate you. Why? إِنَّكَ لَتَصِلْ الرَّحِمِ. Why? Because you indeed kind to your relatives and your kin and kith. So this is one of the means to protect ourselves from being disgraced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They even knew that at the times of Jahiliyyah. So this is such an important thing. It's one of the reasons to enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which the man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asked him, tell me, inform me of a deed that would make me enter Jannah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, تَعْبُدِ اللَّهَ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا. This is always the first thing. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, do not associate partners with him. Why? Because if a person is an idol worshipper, if the person is falling into shirk, what is the benefit then to be kind to the kin and kith? What is the benefit to do whatever? There's no benefit. So the foundation is the tawheed. So to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you would always find وَتُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ, to establish the salah. This is the foundation. وَتُؤْتِ الزَّكَاةِ, and to give the zakah, the pillars of Islam. And then he told them وَتَصِلِ الرَّحِمِ, and to be kind to your kin and kith. That's why we have to understand the religion of Islam in the proper way. Some people, they neglect their salah, and they are so kind to their kin and kith and their relatives, and they would think that this is the deen of Islam, that the deen of Islam is to be kind, and that's it. To be kind is the deen of Islam, and to establish the salah is the deen of Islam. And that's how the deen of Islam is such a comprehensive way of life. It's one of the best deeds beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he was asked about the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, Al-imanu billah. See the consistency in the priorities and the meanings. To believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he was asked alayhi salatu wasalam, then what? He said, thumma silatul rahim. Then to be kind to the kin and kith. Right? And this is the hadith in Abu Ya'la and others, and it's authenticated by Shaykh Albani rahimahullah. This was mentioned right after that. Many hadith will talk about other things, whether it's to be kind to the parents, which is part of being kind to the kin and kith, because they have more rights than others, and so on. If a person wants to be saved from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is one of the ways to do that, is to be kind to your relatives. And there's punishment, there are certain sins, the punishment of it is not just in the hereafter. A person might taste the effect of one's act in this life before the hereafter. And this is something that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, and this is an authentic hadith in Surah Abi Dawood, مَا مِن ذَنْبٍ أَجْدَرُ أَنْ يُعَجِّلِ اللَّهُ لِصَاحِبِهِ الْعُقُوبَةِ فِي الدُّنْيا مَعَ مَا يَدَّخِرُ لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْبَغْيِ وَقَطِيعَةِ الرَّحِمِ. Which means, more or less, that there is no sin more likely that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the person punished in this life with what is being awaiting for that person in the hereafter, meaning also with the punishment in the hereafter, with the transgression and severing the relationship. That means this is a sin that a person would get punished for it if he's severing the relationship in this life, and it doesn't take care away or take care of that sin in the hereafter, still with the punishment in the hereafter. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يدخل الجنة قاطع, that the one that severs the relationship, he would not enter Jannah. But somebody might say, well, if a person dies in the state of Islam, but he had this major sin, he would not enter Jannah, period. These ahadith, as the ulama they explain, either a person in that state, this might lead him to disbelief and die in state of disbelief, or if he died in the state of Islam, while he was severing the relationship with his relatives and so on, that means that if he is punished, he would not enter Jannah from the first instant with everyone else. He will be in the hellfire first, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him enter Jannah. Allah knows best how long. And when we look into these ahadith and the verses of the Quran that talks about that, we should not belittle it and say like Bani Israel said, قَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا. When they said, oh, the hellfire would only touch us for a few days. This is something that is so evil for someone to say such a thing. And since the life in the hereafter is an everlasting one, if we say a person stays in the hellfire for billions and billions of years, and then after that he will go to Jannah, is it something simple, something to be belittled? That is temporary still, even if it's billions, because it's an everlasting life. And who can even sustain the punishment in the hellfire for 1 day, for 1 hour, right? So we should not belittle this, and this is one of the means in which a person might be deprived from entering Jannah from the first instant. There are many hadith that talks about silat al-rahim, and to be kind to the kin and kith, and there are so many rulings to this. And to be kind to them, it's not really conditioned that they are kind to you. They are ordered to be kind to you, yes. But what if they don't? We're not responsible for others. We're responsible for our own actions. And that's why the definition of being kind to the kin and kith is to be kind to them, period, without no condition. And of course you protect your religion and so on and so forth. But this is an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to each and every one of us, regardless how they respond to us. Some people that are kind to their relatives because their relatives are nice people, and they're kind to them. But if the relatives are evil against them and they're transgressing against them, what do? They boycott them. This is not permissible. Even if your relatives are committing injustices against you, protect yourself from whatever injustice they're trying to incur upon you, but still they have rights on you. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ, when a man came to him and he said, Inna li qaraba, I have relatives. Asiluhum wa yaqta'uni. That means I connect the relationship, I visit them, I'm kind to them, I'm there for them and so on, and they are severing the relationship. They don't want to do nothing with me. وَأُحْسِنُ إِلَيْهِمْ وَيُسِئُونَ إِلَيْهِ. I'm kind to them and they are evil towards me. وَأَحْلُمُ عَنْهُمْ وَيَجْهَلُونَ عَلَيْهِ. I'm forbearing with them and there are so much ignorance against me. The Prophet ﷺ, what did he tell him? Did he tell that man, okay, then stay away from them because they are bad people? The Prophet ﷺ, instead, he told him, لَإِن كُنْتَ كَمَا قُلْتَ. If it's true what you're saying, فَكَأَنَّمَا تُسِفُّهُمُ الْمَلْ. As if you are putting dust in their mouth. وَلَا يَزَالُ مَعَكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ ظَهِيرٌ عَلَيْهِمْ مَا دُمْتَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always support you as long as you are continuing to do so. Continuing to do what? To be kind, to be lenient towards them, even though they are like this. To the extent of which the Prophet ﷺ, he even made the definition. Who are the ones that are kind to their relatives? He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, لَيْسَ الْوَاصِلْ بِالْمُكَافِئ. Which means, al-wasil, the one that connects the relationship, is not the one that rewards his relatives. They are kind to him, so he reward them. He's kind to him. This is every single decent human being. They would do this. But this is not what is meant by to be kind to your relatives. The Prophet ﷺ giving us the definition that we won't know if we deal with human beings. We would know it only if we refer to the wahy, to the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْوَاصِلْ الَّذِي إِذَا قُطِعَتْ رَحِمُهُ وَصَلَهُ. The one that is kind to his relatives is the one that when the relationship is severed from their end, he is connecting it. He is being kind to them. This is the real person that is fulfilling the orders of Allah. Not someone that is just going with the norm of the societies and so on. No, this is someone that is extremely kind. With the condition, of course, that a person protecting one's honor and dignity, there's no harm in this, but to be kind to them. They don't want to do anything with you, you are still connecting the relationship, you're asking about them. And if they would think, or you might think that they might think that you want something from them, if you continue to be kind to them and you're not asking anything from them, they would eventually know. And whether they know or not, it doesn't matter. This is part of the deen of Islam. So this is again one of the characteristics of the believers. This is one of the characteristics of the believers, and this is how the surah is started, and this is now the practical test for us. If we are following the verses of the Quran and we build matters of Iman and we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and so on, then we need to be put in practice with our relationships, whether we are going to be kind to our relatives or not, because this is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَصِلْ رَحِمَهُ. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, he should be kind to his relatives, right? And this is basically what the verses and what the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is ordering us. And there are many, again, many evidences. And if we talk about that one particular issue, this can take us a set of episodes basically. But I hope and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this is a reminder for all of us that we review the way that we deal with things, to make it according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, and to step over our desires so that we follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And definitely what you heard from me now, nobody would say this is an evil thing, to be kind to the relatives even if they are not kind to us. It's a good thing. We all agree that this is such a wonderful way of life, wonderful manners, right? So we know that for sure, clearly. But then why some of us won't apply it? Difficult on ourselves, egos and so on and so forth. Then this is what patience comes in place. This is what seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes in place, and submitting ourselves to what is perfectly good. And we know that for sure, not because we feel this way, but because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us in the Quran. And again, to be reminded, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَيْكُمْ رَقِيبًا, that Allah is observing what we're doing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all seeing what we're doing, and we will be held accountable for all of our actions and our speech and all kinds of things. So we should really fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it's mentioned twice in this one verse, the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, because we would need this throughout the surah, throughout our whole entire life, to be dutiful to Allah, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We continue inshallah ta'ala with more verses and more ruling in this blessed surah of Surah An-Nisa. Next time inshallah ta'ala, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us life. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammadin وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا
أفلا
كثيرا.
يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.